Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. It starts for real this week. Another season of Boilermaker basketball begins. Purdue tips things off with Evansville and then Oakland in a pair of bye games to open things up. Although Purdue will be heavily favored in both, there are still plenty of things to watch here early in the season. I'll give you a few things to watch here in Purdue's first two games of the season, and then football suffered another close defeat on Saturday, falling by 5 up at the Big House. Certainly better than the prognosticators expected, but Purdue falls for its 7th straight time. Not going to get any easier as top-ranked Ohio State comes to town. Talk about football on the way out of today's episode. A lot to get to. Let's dive on in. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. There's a ton to talk about. Join the conversation there. You can always send in questions for the show. They're on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. You can email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so that you don't miss an episode either. We're going to be here all season long, and if you enjoy the show, tell a friend about it, share it on social media, give us a 5-star review, however you prefer to do so. We appreciate your support. But Purdue and Evansville tipping things off tomorrow as I record this here on Monday night. Maybe you're listening to this after the game, but Evansville's not a particularly good program. 11-21 last year. Purple Aces haven't had a winning record since 2018. These two teams have only ever played twice, believe it or not. Purdue beat Evansville back in 2004, lost in 2005. I believe this is one of the two in-state teams that Purdue doesn't currently have a win streak of at least a game against. Purdue lost to Indiana the last time they played last season, and Purdue lost to Evansville the last time they played 20 years ago. Preseason KenPom has Evansville at 248 nationally. So, this is not a very good team. That's the second lowest in the Missouri Valley in KenPom, and Evansville was picked to finish last in the Missouri Valley in the preseason media poll, and not a great sign for teams in our state here. The bottom 3 teams in the Missouri Valley preseason poll: Indiana State, Valparaiso, Evansville. The 3 teams from the state of Indiana. We'll see if they can prove the doubters wrong this year. But Purdue opens with Evansville, and then Purdue gets Oakland, one of the better low major programs in the country, without a doubt. Greg Campy's done a great job there for what feels like a million years. He's been there over 40 years, I think. Of course, they had their one shining moment in the NCAA tournament. That was 2 years ago now, when Oakland beat Kentucky. Jack Golke hit the 10 threes or whatever in the opening round. It's a good program, no doubt about it. It's better when you look at the KenPom standings preseason. Oakland is 195, so certainly not great, but they're playing Michigan here. They tip off in 7 minutes against Michigan, so we'll have a little bit better of an idea by that point. But it is interesting. Purdue only plays 4 teams outside of KenPom's preseason top 100. 2 of them come this week: Evansville and Oakland. Then you got Eastern Illinois on Black Friday and Kent State on December 29th. That is it on Purdue's schedule outside the preseason top 100. Akron is just inside. Penn State is just inside. Past that, man, this is a really, really good schedule. Everyone else, unless I'm missing something here, everyone else is inside the top 75. Maybe not Rutgers. It's a pretty good schedule here for Purdue. Some things I'm looking for, because let's face it, if Purdue doesn't come out of here with a couple of 20 to 30 to 40 point wins, then you're raising some eyebrows here, but what I'm looking for is dominance. I think back to 2 years ago when Purdue came into the season really highly regarded and ultimately made it to the Final Four, made it to the national championship game. That team came out and dominated. Purdue beat Samford in the opener 98-45. Just a demolition. I remember that game really well. Purdue just rolled them. And that is a program that was pretty good. If I recall, that Samford team was actually pretty good. That Samford team went 29-6 and gave Kansas a hell of a game in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I thought I was remembering that right. Yeah, Purdue dominated them. And while it's not like I'm going to be sitting here, raising eyebrows if Purdue doesn't win by 50, that's what you want to see. Then Purdue beat Morehead State by 30 in the second game. Just dominant performances. That's kind of what you want to see here. You want to see Purdue just come out and blow teams out that, frankly, it thoroughly outmatches. I think that's what you want to see. These games don't mean that much, but does it look like a team on a mission? Super subjective. There is no way to quantify this, but I didn't think that Purdue looked like a super motivated team in the two exhibitions. Now, that is what it is, right? Because they don't count. Purdue was undoubtedly trying different things. I didn't think Purdue was, running a real tight ship per se. Does that flip like a switch? Because remember, I'm talking about 2 years ago when Purdue lost at Arkansas, and then I think it played Grace College from the homeland, Warsaw, Indiana, in an exhibition. Does Purdue kind of flip a switch now that the regular season is here and just come out and dominate? I'm curious to see what type of tempo Purdue plays at. How much does Purdue want to get out and go? Or is Purdue going to be very methodical, very slow? Purdue's going to be patient in the half court. When you have Braden Smith, you're going to be. You're going to let ball screen stuff get set up. You're going to let Trey Kaufman-Wren go to work on the block. You're going to run stuff to get shots for Fletcher Lawyer. But if Purdue can get out and transition, I think it's going to be a little bit more opportunistic there. You saw it in the exhibition game against UIndy last week. Purdue really looked to push the pace a little bit when it had the opportunity to do so. I'm interested to see how much Purdue tries to do it and how effective Purdue is at doing it. Because I think back to last year, Purdue wasn't a great team in transition because I think a lot of times it got greedy trying to push up lobs for Miles Colvin and Camden Heide that weren't always successful, and Purdue wasn't always the best shooting team in those situations because you had a couple guys on the floor that didn't shoot particularly well last season. Now, I'm curious to see what that looks like. Perimeter defense is what I'm going to have my eye on as well. Again, when you look at the exhibitions, that was a bit of a concern. It was one thing for Kentucky to get to the rim on you. It's another thing for UIndy to get to the rim on you. And UIndy got to the rim easier than you would have liked. Daniel Jacobson was a real difference maker there. I think I probably underestimated, and I shouldn't have done this because I watched Purdue have a 7'4" guy in there for 4 seasons, but maybe I underestimated a little bit how much of a difference it makes just to have the presence of a 7'4" center in there. Daniel Jacobson really did a nice job in that game. Does that continue against better competition? Some of that's going to translate, some of it might not translate. Purdue's got to keep the ball out of the paint, though. It's a nice luxury that Purdue has a little bit more room to commit fouls this year. Last year, Purdue couldn't. It just could not commit fouls. It couldn't let Trey Kaufman-Renn get in foul trouble. This year, Omer Mayer and, not Omer Mayer, Oscar Clough, that's going to be a trip this year. Omer Meyer. Sorry, it's Omer Meyer. I saw Brian's post on Gold and Black. Omer Meyer and Oscar Clough. I'm going to get those names mixed up all year, and I really shouldn't. But Oscar Clough and Daniel Jacobson can take some pressure off of one another in terms of foul trouble, but you'd like to have both of them at your disposal. You got to stop the ball, though. You can't rely on them. You can't let teams get in the lane, because when you get behind, you're in scramble, and you've heard Matt Painter a million times say you can't live in help. I'm curious to see, again, kind of the locked-in aspect of it. How much better is Purdue in that regard when the lights come on this week, when things really get going? Antoine West is the other aspect here. And by the time you're listening to this, you may know the outcome here. It's Monday night. Matt Painter spoke to the media earlier today, and the redshirt decision had not been made for Antoine West yet. I don't know how he plays real minutes. We've talked about this a couple of times in the last month. That backcourt is crowded. When you look at exhibition play, and of course you take that all for what it's worth, Jakari Harris and CJ Cox looked really good, and by all accounts, they had great summers. It's not just exhibition play. They look like they've taken steps forward. Omer Meyer plays a little different role, but he fills a spot that Antoine West doesn't. The argument that's very real on the redshirt thing, and I don't know how you project it, I don't know how you weigh this in, is the whole future of the 5-year eligibility talk. There's real talk, if you haven't seen this, to where the NCAA may do away with the 4+1 redshirt model and have everyone just get 5 years of eligibility. If you play or not your first year, it doesn't matter. You get 5 years, use it or lose it. It doesn't sound like that's happening in the next year or two. I think I saw something that it's not happening this year, it's not happening next year. What's the viability of that down the road? Because if he's going to get 5 years anyways, then a red shirt doesn't do you a ton of good. But if that's not going to happen, how willing are you to burn a year of eligibility to maybe not play a significant minute all year? I don't know. Unless there are going to be enough minutes to justify burning a red shirt, it's a real conundrum, because you're kind of mortgaging the future. You're betting on the NCAA delivering with a decision. If you're betting on the NCAA, some would argue you're doing it wrong. But I don't know. That's a really interesting one. It's a great problem to have, because on most Purdue teams in the past, Antoine West is good enough to play. We'll see what happens there. My inclination is to redshirt, but the reason, if you ask me not to, if that's the way it goes, is the 5-year eligibility thing. Look, over time, I've gotten less into making these bold predictions and really just making types of predictions at all on this program. But I guess I'll say this much about this upcoming season. I have a feeling that this is going to play out fairly similarly to the way the season did a couple of years ago, when Purdue was really highly regarded, when Purdue came in with a really highly anticipated team, top 5 preseason, where Purdue was in the top 5 or so for the majority of the year. Purdue lost some games, and you look at this year's Purdue team, it could lose at Alabama next week. It could. It's not going to surprise anyone. KenPom has Purdue -2. That's a coin flip. But I think Purdue's going to be in the mix of the national title conversation all year. I think Purdue's going to be around the top of the sport all year. I would pick Purdue to win the regular season Big Ten title. There are fewer questions about Purdue than any other Big Ten team right now. It looks to me like Purdue got a fairly favorable Big Ten scheduling draw. End of January is a tough stretch. You look at that stretch where you go Iowa at home, which, you should be fine. It's a little bit light of a start. But then at USC and UCLA, two teams inside the top 25 at KenPom on the road across the country. You come home for Illinois. You go to Indiana. You go to Maryland. That's a pretty tough stretch right there. That's not easy. That's your 5-game stretch that might win or lose you the Big Ten title. You never know. If you lose early, if you somehow continue to not figure out that whole away game early in Big Ten play thing, I don't know, but that's a really daunting stretch. Aside from that, though, what does it look like? I think 17-3 is the best anyone has done in the 20-game league schedule. Are you up in that mix, or are you down closer to the 15-5, 14-6? I wouldn't bet on 14-6, but anything's possible here. It's a pretty good league. I am going to lean that Braden Smith falls just short of Bobby Hurley's assist record. That's kind of the one that everyone's predicting whether it happens or not. I don't know, man. I don't know. I got to be careful because he certainly could do it, and I don't want to be the one that ends up on the wrong end of a clips video or something when it happens. So I don't know. It's a big ask. That's a lot of assists again this year. We'll see, man. We'll see. I do think, though, Braden Smith's going to finish as a first-team All-American. He'll win Big Ten Player of the Year again, and he'll be right in the mix of National Player of the Year. He'll be the only upperclassman in that mix. I think one or two of these freshmen is just going to be fantastic. I will throw out that Purdue doesn't lose at Mackey Arena this year, which happened a couple years ago. The Final Four year, Purdue didn't lose at Mackey Arena. And then the Carson Edwards Elite 8 year, 2019, Purdue did not lose at Mackey Arena. And we will say that Purdue goes through the NCAA tournament without losing. Let's go with it. Purdue gets it done, wins its first national title. My predictions there for the upcoming season. We're in the final stretch of 2025 as Thanksgiving and Christmas are just around the corner. We're all checking items off of our lists before the end of the year. Did you review your insurance program here in 2025? If not, the time is now. As an Indiana Farm Bureau insurance agent, I'm here to help you make sure that your insurance program is exactly where you need it to be. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com, and let's make sure you are all set and ready to go for 2026. Diving into the football side of things here, Purdue fell short on Saturday, 21-16 under the lights at the Big House. A really respectable effort comes up short. Say what you want, but Purdue does continue to compete at a pretty high level. Moral victories are what they are. And if you're opposed to the concept, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you because, yes, I agree with what Barry Odom said after the Illinois game, to where coming out and playing hard is the bare minimum expectation. But we saw last year Purdue not do that. And this alone is a positive. We've seen Purdue no-show in games before. This wasn't the case. Purdue's coming out and playing hard. At some point, you need to win the football games. But this was a 21-point spread. Purdue is a massive underdog here. And it comes out and delivers a really good effort. Were there parts of it that were a little misleading? Sure. Michigan throws an interception in the red zone. Granted, that ended up being a touchdown anyways when you factor in the punt. We'll get to that. Michigan fumbles out of the end zone. Bryce Underwood is inside the 10 maybe when that ball got punched out. It bounces through the end zone for a touchback. Michigan 6.5 yards per play to 4.2 for Purdue. Just 2 for 5 in the red zone for the Wolverines. It wasn't a good performance by Michigan by any means, but Purdue didn't hand it to them either. You've got to find ways to compete when you're outmatched. Purdue did so. It was interesting. I thought it looked like Purdue had very little faith in the pass game, but part of it too was that Purdue came out with a very simple game plan. Less than 4 yards per attempt, average depth of target for Ryan Brown. So his average throw was less than 4 yards past the line of scrimmage. That's pretty short. That's a massive outlier compared to the rest of his season. Did Purdue not trust the pass protection? That would certainly be reasonable. I can see why Purdue doesn't trust its tackles that much. You look at Bakeen Coley, you look at Joey Tanona's had a fine year, but a lot of pressure coming on the outside. How much do you trust your receivers to get separation down the field? Because if they're not open, you're probably looking at taking a sack. Where's Purdue at with Ryan Brown? Where's Purdue at with a lot of this? The tight ends are a non-factor. I thought you saw the very conservative, very clock-chewing game plan come through on the 4th and 2. Around midfield when it was 14-10, Purdue runs a quarterback power with Malachi Singleton. I'm not one who's going to sit here and second-guess the play calling. It is what it is. If it works, you look like a genius. It wasn't unrealistic, but when you run quarterback power, this is going to sound way dumber and way more simplistic than I mean it to. When you run quarterback power, you take the element of throwing the ball out of the equation. The defense doesn't have to worry about it. Purdue doesn't throw out of the Malachi Singleton formation much. It doesn't do it a whole lot, but it does. But in that situation, you see Singleton come on the field. You probably had a pretty good idea it was going to be a run coming out of the TV time out there. It is what it is. It's one play call. You can second guess it all you want. But, I thought it was telling. But I think for most of this year, Josh Henson's done a nice job at calling plays that his offense is able to execute, at calling plays that don't put you in a bad position. This was another case of it. I thought everything Purdue did was sensible. It was cohesive. It all made sense. Did Purdue win time of possession? Purdue wins time of possession. It runs more plays than Michigan. It was what it was. Purdue had a nice performance. It really did. You look at it. Purdue just has such a thin margin for error. It is the punt by Jack McAllister that really shifted the game. Purdue got that interception of Underwood, and at that point, it was 7-7, and you were hoping to go in the locker room at least tied at 7. Instead, that punt gets shanked. Michigan goes in and scores, so it's 14-7 at half, and it feels different than if it's 7-7. You can breathe a little easier in that home locker room. You can feel a little bit better. The pressure isn't mounted like it is if it's 7-7. The margins for error are thin. It's that, and it's that fourth down play. But, it is what it is. It was a good effort by Purdue. It's a game that Purdue's probably not yet ready to win. It's a game that next year you hope Purdue is ready to win, that Purdue should be ready to win, because Michigan kind of handed that one to Purdue at times, and Purdue wasn't able to take advantage. But, I did want to talk a little bit about Devin Mockobee. Today it was announced that Mockabee's going to miss the rest of the season. He went down in the fourth quarter of the game against Rutgers. He got rolled up upon, and sounds like he underwent a procedure earlier this week that is going to cause him to miss the rest of this season. A real bummer that it ends early. A real bummer that he doesn't get to finish out his senior season. What a nice career it's been. He finishes at 2,987 rushing yards. That's good for fourth all-time in Purdue history. He burst on the scene as just a plucky walk-on, man. I remember that game in 2022 against Indiana State. The run game was the angst of the fan base after the way the season opener against Penn State ended. A real heartbreaker. And he becomes a fan favorite. He gets more and more reps over time. He becomes the starter. He has a run at Minnesota that helps seal the deal for Purdue in an upset win. And he carried the ball like 35 times against Nebraska as Purdue won a shootout at Ross-Ade and had a really nice year. He scored a touchdown at Indiana to help Purdue pull away and win the Big Ten West. And, over the last 4 seasons of Purdue football, there hasn't been many constants. The student section's in a new spot than it was when Devin Mockobee started. There wasn't a tunnel back when Devin Mockobee started. Jeff Brom was his coach. Ryan Walters has come and gone. Barry Odom's there now. It looks so much different than it did. He's the only guy who's really been around for all of that. I believe that he's the only player on the roster this year that played when Jeff Brom was at Purdue. If I'm forgetting someone, at me, because I'd like to know I'm wrong if I'm wrong. But he's kind of the last one. He was the last one standing, and he's someone who stayed when he didn't have to. This was someone who could have gotten an opportunity elsewhere, a program with more stability, a program that won more the last 3 years, but he stuck around. He's been the lone constant. He's not the most naturally gifted player, but he goes out there and plays harder than anyone else on the field. And that's what really endears him to the Purdue fan base. He became a fan favorite early. He's gotten a lot of flowers from the fans, and rightfully so. He's had a really good career at Purdue. It's a bummer that it has to end early, but it's been a wonderful career. A really good story. Just a walk-on from Southern Indiana, from Boonville. Turns into the 4th all-time leading rusher in Purdue history. I don't have a ton to talk about here ahead of the Ohio State game. Ohio State's a 28.5-point favorite. Number 1 team in the country. Purdue is 7-11 all-time against number 1 overall teams. We'll see if that can continue, if Purdue can shock the world, to put it mildly. But I want to talk about the big picture here. Last week I got asked about some big picture Big Ten stuff, and I wasn't thrilled with the way I articulated my answer. But this week is the perfect example of this. Talking about what the new Big Ten looks like, Purdue is not the only program that's sitting here struggling in the current landscape of the Big Ten. When you're playing some of the better teams, I want to take you through Ohio State's stretch in the Big Ten this year. This is the Big Ten schedule. 9.5-point favorite at Washington. Buckeyes win by 18. 23.5-point favorite over Minnesota. Ohio State wins by 39. 14.5-point favorite at Illinois. Wins by 18. 25-point favorite at Wisconsin. Wins by 34. 20.5 point favorite over Penn State, wins by 24. 28.5 point favorite at Purdue. Probably looking at a 25 to 30 point favorite at home against UCLA and Rutgers. Then we'll see what happens when Ohio State goes up to Michigan. Let's pencil that in at a 10-point spread, something around there. Ohio State's going to get through this year with 2 games less than a 14-point spread and 3 games less than a 3 touchdown spread out of the 9 conference game it plays. The Big Ten has to find a way to get more competitive. This isn't good for business. As the TV networks get more and more involved here, this isn't good for business to just have Ohio State steamroll everyone. It's a compliment to the Buckeyes, right? I mean, this is a terrific program. Ryan Day has been excellent there. He has not missed a beat from where Urban Meyer left it off. It's really interesting because the conversation around Ohio State was what it was at the end of November last year. It lost to Michigan for the 4th straight year in a game that it just had no business losing to a Michigan team that just wasn't very good. But since then, Ohio State's just been utterly dominant, just a dominant force. And coming into this game, less than 7 points per game allowed. It's just an absolute monster of a program. But the Big Ten has to be more competitive than this. Behind closed doors, I can promise you this is a real conversation. That Ohio State is steamrolling teams like it is, and Indiana is steamrolling teams like it is, because this is making for a rather boring product. And yes, it's setting up for an epic showdown in Indianapolis of 1 versus 2, but it's not great for the Big Ten Conference when you're seeing the top team just come in every week, is a gigantic favorite, and covering all of these. Ohio State's covered the spread in all 5 of its Big Ten games so far. Do with that what you may ahead of Saturday. I'm not endorsing anything, but this is a real problem the Big Ten has on its hands. As I said, I mean, Purdue's likely to get rolled here. We'll see. If you're a Purdue fan, you want to see Purdue come out and put up a fight, compete hard. Purdue doesn't have anyone that's going to cover Jeremiah Smith. Purdue doesn't have anyone that's going to cover Carnell Tate. Max Clare returns to Ross-Ade Stadium. Good tight end. He's their 3rd leading receiver. Julian Sayan's an awesome quarterback. He's right in the mix of the Heisman race right now. I always remember how much Nick Saban raved about him, kind of off the record, when he was committed to Alabama and ended up signing with Alabama before Nick Saban retired. Then he transferred to Ohio State. He's been awesome. He's been awesome. And this is a Buckeye team that just keeps rolling everybody. They're the favorite to win the national title for good reason. Now, some of the best moments of Purdue football here in the 21st century have come in home upsets against Ohio State. 5 times. 5 times in the 21st century has Ohio State fallen at Ross-Ade Stadium. Who could ever forget 2000? Holy Toledo. A 4th quarter of an unbelievable result caps off an unbelievable month. That team, I mean, that 2000 team, just what a roller coaster. Close losses at Penn State and Notre Dame. Dramatic wins over Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio State. A loss on the road to a terrible Michigan State team by 20. Just wild. Just wild. So much of that season's just crazy. 2009, Purdue wins out of nowhere. Ryan Kerrigan terrorizes Ohio State. That keeps Ohio State out of the national title. Same deal with 2018. I'd looked it up earlier this year when Luke Altmaier was having a field day against Purdue. The record, most passing yards ever allowed by Purdue in a single game, was Dwayne Haskins in that game in 2018. threw for like 500 yards. Purdue still won. It's been tough sledding. The last 3 times Purdue and Ohio State have met, average margin of defeat, a little over 35 points. It's been a little bit rough under Ryan Day, but we'll see. We'll see what happens on Saturday. This 1 p.m. kick is weird. It's weird. I don't know what Big Ten Network is doing with these sort of alternative kick times this year. Kind of weird. Throws off the balance if you're at home watching, if you're really like dialed into other stuff across the country. Really throws you off. Kind of weird. But guys, that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for spending your time with me. If you enjoyed the show, give it a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform. Be sure to subscribe there as well so that you don't miss an episode. And send in your questions on Twitter at BoilersBeyond or via email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. I'll be back next week. We'll talk about the first week of basketball season. We'll talk about the happenings on the gridiron between the Boilers and Buckeyes. Until then, enjoy a busy week of sports, guys. Take care.